Hi everyone, this is Melissa from Melissa Made, and today we're going to be making this adorable card using the new July paper door kit from Whimsy Stamps called Beaucoup Bouquet. And I'm starting out with some watercolor paper, and I'm taking one of the flowers from the stamp set that comes in the kit and inking that flower up with Versamark ink and then stamping it onto the smooth side of my Canson watercolor paper. I'm also going to be adding some of the white embossing powder that comes in your kit from Ranger, and I'm using my heat tool to go ahead and emboss that flower. Now, as we watercolor with the inks that come in your kit, I am going to occasionally dry that flower again with my heat tool, being careful not to reheat the embossing that's already there. So I'm going to start with a mustard seed distress ink that comes in the kit, spray water over the entire paper, and then use a watercolor brush that's filled with water to simply smush on that color. I don't care about staying in the lines, as it's not going to matter, because I'm going to go ahead and use the Mermaid Lagoon blue ink that comes in your kit as well, and I'm going to go ahead and watercolor that on after adding a little bit more water to the flower. And you can see how, even though I went outside the lines with the yellow, I'm being a little bit more careful with the blue so that I don't turn that flower a green color, and I add water throughout so I get a beautiful watercolored edge to this. Now I will be using a die cut later on to die cut the flower, so I really don't need to go so far outside of the flower, but you can see that would also be a pretty card if you wanted to do that instead. And so you can see me using my heat tool and avoiding heating that white embossing powder up too much, because I don't want it to crack it. I don't want it to crack if I heat it too much. So now I'm going to go in with a fine watercolor brush. This one is just a regular paintbrush. It has no water in it. And I'm going to add a little bit more of that mustard seed ink to the petals that all come to the center of the flower, because if you look at most flowers, they will have a gradation from dark to light, and it usually starts at the center of the petals. So I do that all around, and I decide that I need to soften those lines a little bit. So all I'm doing is going back in with the mustard seed and my watercolor brush and kind of smushing that color, and it gives you a very beautiful kind of textured flower, but it's not too harsh. So now I will be taking the die that's available in this Whimsy paper door kit this month. You get a number of dies with all of the stamps, which I think is fantastic. And now I'm going to be taking the Mermaid Lagoon and the mustard seed and combining them to get this gorgeous green. Now, if you use a little bit less yellow, you'll get a very beautiful turquoise color, and you can see that in some of the other cards that other people have made with the paper door kit, and also myself. I showed you some at the beginning of this video. And but for this, I kind of wanted it to look like almost like greenery in the back of these flowers. And I thought later that maybe what I could have done to add a nice touch to this is also add some of the leaves that come in the kit and stamp those in that green on top of this watercolored background. I would have added just a little bit of detail to that, but I thought of that in hindsight. So instead, I'm just going to add some splashes of the green after watercoloring. The paper that I'm using for this is the Bristol Smooth. It doesn't take watercolor as well as watercolor paper, but it works fine for these purposes. So that's what I had handy, so that's what I grabbed. So now I'm going to take the Mermaid Lagoon again and do the exact same thing and create some splashes in the background, just to add a little bit more blue to the card, because I feel like the blue is really a pretty color in it, and it matches the papers that come in the kit really well, and specifically this one blue paper that has a little bit of shine to it that I think is gorgeous. So I'm just adding some splatters, and I decide that I'm going to go outside of my kit and pull out a rectangle die and die cut this, only because I want clean edges. If you don't have a rectangle die, you do not need to. You can mount the piece of paper onto some of the cardstock that comes in the kit, but it's just an easy way to get a nice clean edge. So this is the paper that I'm talking about, and I went ahead and cut it down to the size of an A2 card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere that layer to that turquoise paper using my ATG. tape runner. So once I get that added, I decide that I want to pick out a sentiment. There are no sentiments that come in this stamp set, but as a stamper you probably have some in your stash. So I happen to use a Whimsy stamp set that was specifically made for this kit, I think, because it's all floral sentiments. And be careful with those magnets that come with your MISTI, because as I went off camera there, I was pulling them off of my pads of my fingers because they stuck together right on my pad. And now I'm going to use my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink and ink up that stamp and go ahead and use my MISTI. Now I'm using my MISTI because with all the work that I put into the background, I don't want to mess up, and the MISTI is a perfect tool for, you know, adding your ink and then stamping multiple times if you need to. And so with the VersaFine Clair, it gives you this beautiful perfect sentiment stamping. I just love it. And so once I have that sentiment on there, I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to my card base. Again, this is an A2 size card. And once I have that adhered, I'm going to go ahead and add the flowers that we did in the beginning. And for the first layer of flowers, I'm just going to use a little Tombow tape runner and stick that down. And then for the second layer, I'll use a little bit of foam tape, which is fairly thin. And then for the third layer, I'll use the dots that you see to the side there, the foam dots. And this just gives the card a little bit more dimension and a little bit more interest. But you can see in that background that beautiful green that I made. And if I had used the leaves that come in the kit, the stamp leaves, I could have, you know, created a little bit more interest by adding those in the background. So this is the finished card. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and you'll join us again for more paper door kits at Whimsy Stamps and Melissa Made. Have a great day.